And we are live. All right, folks, if any of you are watching this live, as is my normal custom, please put something in the chat box. Tell me that you can hear me. I did check the microphone. It is supposed to be working. But, microphones being what they are, I'm never quite certain, especially since this one is blinking, which means it might be running out of power. Okay. So I'm going to start this live cast by trying to plug in the microphone and getting the backup out. I do apologize. Let's see. We have the little walls. So the idea here really is to Is this better? I have a suspicion that this microphone does not like. How about now? Can you hear anything now? Anything? Oh, this sucks. Much more better. Okay. So I think this microphone doesn't like being plugged in, but there's a built-in battery that appears to be crapping out. It was charging. I unplugged it, and to me it started blinking as if there is low battery. So what I'm going to do, while I'm talking, I'm going to get my spare set up and hopefully plugged in so that if this one craps out, I can fairly quickly switch. Okay. At least that's the plan. We'll see how it works. All right, where was I? Okay, that's part of it. In the meantime, think of the questions, and if not, once I get the microphones wrestled into submission, I'm going to start talking about night vision, and most specifically about the particular night vision monocular I just acquired, and why I chose this specific one, which I think is probably it's Putin's fault. This is probably the best comment of the day. It's Putin's fault that your microphone died. Yes, I fully agree. Those damn Russians. All right, I've got backup microphone coming in, so I'll be so wired. It's borderline illegal. Okay. Let's try this thing. Tell me if you can hear me now. I'll switch to another mic. How about now? Is this better? Anything? Oh, of course. This is working. This is working. This is working. Okay. Alrighty. I've got a lot of familiar faces here. PT belt. All right. What is PT belt? Anyone? You don't know either? Okay. Good. Can you hear me now? Anything? Okay. I can hear you. What? All right. Does that mean you guys can hear me or not? Army joke. The most important piece of safety equipment you can have. All right. Since you are able to tell me that PT is an army joke, that means you heard me reasonably well. Yes, sound is good. Excellent. All right, guys. I do apologize. Okay, where was I? Night vision stuff. Okay. I'll start talking about night vision a little bit. A little bit review first, then I'll talk about my specific choices, what I'm looking for, and things like that. And then, but I will be stopping. If you ask a question, I will stop right there and address a question rather than do a long lecture and then start catching up. I'll try to answer everything in real time. I did a live show once on difference between what we call, night vision, this, right, versus thermals. Let's say this is the iRay Micro, and how they work, right? And there are two really key differences in terms of how they work. And the key differences are that, well, thermal obviously sees radiation that is emitted by heat, and the really, really important distinction that does not get enough mileage Since we went into night vision, are we going to have an IR laser illuminator devices in the future? We already have them now, so I'm not entirely sure what this pertains. Maybe you want to specify a little bit. Okay. One of the core differences between what we call night vision, basically image intensifier tubes, and the thermal is that thermal looks at light radiation that is emitted. Basically, every warm object emits some amount of radiation, so you don't need to have any external sources of illumination to see a warm object. Basically, all you need is some thermal contrast, right? If you are looking at something that is either warmer or colder than the background, than the environment, you will be able to see it with a thermal rifle scope camera, whatever. Night vision, what we usually call night vision, whether digital or analog, and we'll talk about the differences a little bit. What we typically call night vision still needs some amount of reflected light. The way our eyes normally work is that there is a light source, sun, lamp, whatever, right? And all of that scattered light bounces around, reflects off of things, and this reflection is what you see. That's why you're able to see surface textures, because they'll reflect differently and stuff like that. And from that standpoint, night vision works much more similarly to a normal human eye, in that it also looks for reflected light. Now, at night, there is very, very little reflected light, so we have come up with these devices called image intensifier tubes that are able to amplify that scattered and weak available light to a very significant degree. Interestingly, how far it amplifies is not quite straightforward. While preparing for this and choosing the night vision monocular, I looked a little bit at the specs, and they're kind of asinine. So we'll talk about that in a moment. All right, so that's the core difference between night vision and thermal. Well, what's another core difference? Well, traditional night vision devices like this guy I have here. It's a very, very new device. This is a Photonis PD PRO 16M. It's fundamentally an analog device, right? There is no obvious way with it configured the way it is to save an image, to digitize it, to do anything else with it, right? It's essentially light goes in, and I've got a cover here because it's fairly bright. I don't want to accidentally turn it on and burn out the tube. It's auto-gated, but there's still a chance to do that. But basically, light goes in here, some amplification happens. There is a battery, single AAA battery powering this, and that's the eyepiece, right? And through the eyepiece, light comes out, greatly amplified. There is at no point anywhere in here was this image saved, digitized, massaged, processed. It is really a very, very analog device. There is digital night vision, which is more like a camera. And the thermal rifle scopes that we have, like this guy, like this iRay, they are all fundamentally digital devices in the sense that the front is a camera. It generates an image, typically, digitizes it. Sometimes it has analog outputs, but it's still functional and electronically saved image. And then on the back here, there is a little micro display that spits out the image back out to you. And in between, that can be processed, massaged, corrected, enhanced, etc. But it is fundamentally, it can be fundamentally enhanced. With the analog image intensifiers, no, not really. I mean, it is designed in a particular way. Each one is tested. When you buy it, there's a set of specifications specific to your particular tube, and that's it. Okay. Oh, I see. Oh, that's actually a good comment here. Yes, PVS 31 plus Icoti, cheap mode. Fantastic mode, albeit heavy, mostly use the 31s in combat. Now, a civilian and own a Psionics Aurora scratches the itch, but it's not the same. Yeah, Psionics Aurora is a really good example of a commercial digital night vision device, actually one of the better ones for the money, but it is not quite the same as a higher quality stuff. Now, if you combine it with an illuminator, it will actually get a good bit better. As is currently available, you can buy stuff like the Psionics Aurora is broadly equivalent to like 2G, second generation night vision, not the super 2G, like the original 2G. So it is much better than nothing. And it is not nearly as expensive as the modern 3G, 4G. This sucker is what Photonis calls 4G, and I'll talk about that in a minute. It's not nearly as good. But you can save your image. You can see in much lower light. You can get some color information at fairly low light. So it really depends on what you're interested in. I'll talk about trade-offs momentarily. Okay. Okay. Let's see. Oh yeah, I meant a live session on that topic. I don't know enough about commercial illuminators and IR lasers at this stage to do a reasonably thorough discussion. The ones I know about, you can't get. And the ones that are available to consumers, I have not really had a chance to really dig through. If there is enough interest, I will. But at this stage, it's not something I'm comfortable covering in any depth. Okay. All right. As far as the generations of night vision devices, image intensified tubes go, I'm not going to go through what they all are. There are some technological changes. Gen 2 introduced a microchannel plate. Gen 3 improved the cathode. I will talk a little bit about what Photonis calls 4G because it's interesting and it's one of the reasons I went with this one. Does the military use the equality? Well, Mr. MB just said that he used it in the military, so I think it's fair to say that they do. Okay. Where was I? Yeah. Generations over image intensifiers. What Photonis calls 4G is kind of interesting. First of all, so who makes image intensifier tubes? There are a few manufacturers around the world. In the civilized world, there are three main ones. One is L3, another one is Elbit, and the third one is Photonis in France. L3 is the most famous one. Vast majority of high-quality L3 tubes go to US military's use, and some number of them make it out into the civilian world. They're fairly expensive and kind of hard to get, to be honest with you. The reason why Elbit makes them, Elbit is an large Israeli aerospace company, but they don't make them in Israel. They do make them in the United States, in Virginia, of all places. What happened was that at some point, it's okay. If you want a demo review a Burst 4, I can loan you a spare. Not that it's all that easy to get, but now that Russia is on the naughty list. If I appreciate the offer. If I decide to dig into this, I'll hit you up. I'm not shy about that. But at this stage, I don't have plans to really get into it, at least not for a little bit. I'm sort of a little bit overbooked already as is. Okay. What was I? Image intensifier tubes. Yeah, Elbit. So what happened was that ITT was one of the regional manufacturers, and so was Elbit. ITT was one of the regional manufacturers, so was L3. L3 bought ITT, and as a part of that whole merger, it wasn't well. Okay, the merger was between Harris and L3. Harris bought ITT. Harris and L3 merged. As a part of the merger, U.S. government told them, okay, if you merge, there will be only one supplier of image intensifier tubes for the U.S. military. So how about you divest one of the factories? And one of the factories that's in Virginia was purchased by Elbit. So in terms of pure specs, L3 seems to make the best tubes, but honestly, the ones I've seen lately from Elbit have been very, very good. Maybe not as high gain, but very, very good. And then there is Photonis in France, which also makes excellent tubes. German military uses them. Hensoldt, Theon use them. Quite a few U.S. military uses them to some degree as well, although there are different devices with it. And they march a little bit to the beat of their own drum, which is really the reason why I wanted one. So now we get to 4G. With the third generation image intensifier tubes, there has been a lot of kind of variations. They talk about 3G plus and then 3G. So you may have heard tubes that were filmed or filmless or this or that. They were all different variations on the same basic theme. They were really optimizations of existing technologies, trying to find the right compromise of lifetime and performance, right? You can make extremely high-performing tubes, but the cathode becomes essentially a bit fragile, and a lifetime goes down substantially. And different companies have been solving this problem in different ways. One of the most amazing things is that the fundamental technology of analog night vision of the image intensifier tubes is quite old. I mean, we've had significant improvements in performance and various optimizations, but in terms of the fundamentals, the science of it, we haven't seen anything new probably since 60s, 70s, something like that, which is sort of impressive. What does Photonis call 4G and why I'm interested? Photonis tubes seem, on the balance of it, to have a little bit less gain and a little bit lower SNR than the best of the L3 tubes. There is something called FOAM. FOAM stands for figure of merit. Figure of merit that is very frequently used to analyze tubes is SNR signal-to-noise ratio, multiplied by resolution in line pairs per millimeter. And in terms of foam, the one I have here is a little bit over 2200, which is actually quite good, but I've seen some L3 tubes that are in the 2900 range, and there are some higher ones out there as well. They're hard to get, but I know a lot of people. If I really, really tried hard, I probably would be able to get my hands on one. Why did I choose this one? And that sort of comes down to what Photonis calls 4G. The basic specs, the basic numerical specs we all love so much. There are some good comments that I'll get to momentarily. There are those nice single number specs that we love so much, but they do not tell you the whole story. And when you think of getting a night vision monocular, night vision goggle, you probably want to think a little bit more about the application. All right, Mr. Fire Prank 6 goes, Elbit has pretty awesome tubes for a bit less money than L3, usually more available too, less wait time. L3 filmless is generally considered the best, however, Photonis has some serious advantages, and I generally agree with that statement. Namely, they're lighter, smaller, longer battery life, and probably most important, out-of-band light detection. That which is exactly this out-of-band light detection and a small compact size is almost exactly why I went with Photonis. And the reason is that I'm not exactly an operator, right? So I have not served in the military. I don't kick down doors. I don't look for terrorists in dark caves. My use case for this thing is a little bit different. I want to put it in a gun behind a holographic sight or NACOG, something like that, and go shoot a pig. It might end up sitting in a gun for a little bit for my home defense gun, where it has reasonable advantages. But the situations where I may want to use this thing, and this is an important distinction, situation where I use this thing is a very high contrast situation, meaning there will be some very dark patches and comparatively light patches. So what I'm looking for in a tube, I want broad out-of-band response. I'll explain what that is in a minute. I also want very, very fast auto-gating, and to the best of my knowledge, Photonis has the best auto-gating. I want very low halo, right? When these things amplify light fairly dramatically, and when there's something bright in the field of view, it can really white out. All the different modern tubes deal with it quite well, but Photonis has, from what I have seen, the best halo control. And also like to look at the night sky, right? When you look up in the night sky through the image intensifier tube, you want to have a very low noise floor. I'm not necessarily looking for the most amplification, but I want very low EBI. EBI stands for equivalent background illumination. Okay. All right, we've got some nice discussion here in the comments. So Mr. Brooks Precision goes, Photonis gets such a bad rep, though, a little bit. And apparently they get a bad rep because they supply a lot of Gen 2 tubes. They do. But, modern Gen 2 tubes are also better than older Gen 2. And they are indeed legal in Europe. So a lot of the European commercially available night vision devices are based on Photonis's Gen 2 tubes. For example, when I purchased this guy, and this is what Photonis calls 4G, when I purchased this guy, it very specifically says for sale in US only. I do not think you can get this in Europe, and you most certainly cannot fly across the borders, at least not legally. Okay. So since this conversation of generations have come up again, so what is 4G for Photonis? The gain is a little bit less than L3 or Lbit. EBI looks to be lower. I've seen a lot of tubes through work, and this one has one of the best EBIs that I can see, although most modern ones are good in that regard. it has really good out-of-band response. What does out-of-band mean? When we look at something with a human eye, we see in a particular spectral range of colors. If you wish, typically a human where was I? Yeah. What a human eye sees in a wavelength range of approximately 400 to 680 nanometers, 700, somewhere there, right? With the longer wavelength being red and the shorter being blue. Most traditional image intensifier tubes are really optimized to work in the near-infrared range, meaning wavelengths just a little bit longer than what we normally see. That's called near-infrared, and that's the range from about 650, 700 nanometers up to about 850, 900 or so. If you wonder, most of the commercial laser rangefinders use lasers at about 900 nanometer wavelength. And if the laser is peppy enough, using your night vision goggle monocular, you fire your laser rangefinder, you actually can see the spot very frequently, right? And that's about as long of a wavelength as commercial image intensifiers, most regular image intensifiers can see. What Photonis did, rather than chase the most gain and the most amplification, they significantly extended the spectral response, meaning this thing sees very nicely down to 400 nanometers, so it covers the entire range of human vision, in addition to the regular near-infrared range. And on the long end, it's also able to see wavelengths longer than what typical L3 and L-bit tubes can, at least the ones that I have seen. And from what I can tell, it can actually pick up 1064 designators to some degree. It's not optimal there, but it sees well above 900 nanometers. Okay. To me, that is kind of important, partly because of the things I do for work. I get to play with a lot of different sources, and this is helpful for me. Partly because I want to use it a good bit behind a day optic. And most day optics are really not optimized for transmission in the near-infrared. And being able to see well in the regular visual range is helpful for me. Let's see what we got. So in the civilian world, night vision is only really used when white light is not appropriate to be used. I think hunting is mostly what night vision is used for still, right? Hunting, self-defense, general observation. I use it to look at the night sky for general astronomy. You can use it for nighttime observation of anything, really. If it's really, really pitch black, you can use it to just walk around, but that's really, that was really kind of weird. You know, we all watch movies, right? So everybody who has not used these things has this illusion that they will pop their night vision goggles on and they'll just be running around through a dark forest at night without stumbling and all that. Yeah, doesn't work that way, right? So it's not quite like that. From a standpoint of situational awareness, it is quite good, but it's not ideal. And the guys who you see who actually can move really fast at night using these things, you have to train to do that. It does not come naturally. It's a sort of a weird experience. It does restrict your situational awareness, does restrict your field of view. The field of view is actually pretty good. It's about 40 degrees, which is fairly standard for PFS 14s and stuff like that. Even if you have two of them, not quite enough. On the higher end, the military uses quad tube ones that kind of give you this huge panoramic view, which is really cool. That helps. You still have to train, right? So for me, this is not for running around anywhere. Okay. Let's see. Is it difficult to get good footage through night vision? If your fixturing is good, it's not that hard. There are some cameras designed to look through these things, but even as is, it's not particularly hard to set up. I have a Picatinny rail adapter, basically a gun mount for this thing. So I am going to take some footage here and there, and I'll show you. I love going on night hikes, nocturnal animal spotting, and the stars. Bingo. When you're actually hiking, most of the time, I am at least, I'm better off just letting my eyes adapt and making my way, trying to use night vision continuously to hike around. For me is unnatural, right? Maybe you guys can do it. I can't do it very well. Okay. Yeah, exactly. Not at all like video games or highly weird makes it seem. You have to train a lot on the NVGs to be able to move effectively with them. Working with PVS 14 is like playing a game of Shadow or Hole. Exactly. Okay. So it is not quite that straightforward. However, for observation, when you have a chance to slow down and look around, or if you want to do nighttime animal spotting where you can sit and go and see what comes around, these things are great. Once again, looking at the stars, these things are great. They don't turn night into day. It is still night, right? It's just a more observable night in many ways, shape or form, right? Okay. Let's see. We've got some good discussion here. Okay. So I have seen footage people use one night vision tube and thermal on another tube with the helmet mount. Is it novelty or real? No, it's very much real. So my first experience with image intensifier tubes was about 20 years ago when I worked at Raytheon. I worked on a very first generation of something that became ENVG, enhanced night vision goggle. And what ENVG was, it was a fusion of image intensifier tubes digitized with an image sensor behind it and a thermal camera fused and overlaid in front of you. You can even buy them commercially. It's expensive. It'll cost you 20 some grand. Military uses them all the time. It's a very commonly available device. And if you want one thing to do it all, that is absolutely the way to do it, right? So there's no question that that's the way to do it. There may be a way to do this commercially for less money coming up. Sorted is for weapon-mounted stuff, but that may be a conversation for another day. One interesting anecdote from this. So 20 years ago when I was at Raytheon, and that's when I was working on this ENVG thing, I worked more on the thermal side of things. That's sort of where my field of expertise is. But we had image intensifier tubes, and we would fuse the images. We'd basically get the image from a night vision tube, and then take the contour from the thermal to overlay it, right, so that you can figure out where there's regular stuff and where you have a warm object that's overlaid in the image. And that wasn't such a simple thing to do at the time. Now a bunch of people do it, but the prevalent wisdom back then, to a good degree, was everybody was absolutely convinced that digital night vision is advancing so fast, is coming up so fast, that any moment now, all these traditional analog night vision devices are going to be obsolete like 8 minutes from now. And we're done. Well, fast forward 20 years, that's fairly hard to find. Can't keep them in stock. And in terms of low light performance, they still outperform even the best of the digital night vision. Though that, to some degree, is probably going to change, but not immediately. It's going to take a little time. Okay. Since we get to that, let's talk a little bit about night vision. So what is digital night vision? Digital night vision, to a significant degree, is basically just a regular camera really well optimized for low light. It sounds easier than it really is. Getting a digital camera of reasonably normal wearable size, etc., to see really, really well at night, let's say equivalent to Gen 2. Night vision is not so straightforward, but commercially available Psionics Aurora, which is less than $1,000, is about equivalent to the second generation night vision. At one of the SPIE shows that I go to for my day job, earlier this year, 3 different companies came out with image sensors and cameras. Essentially, those were just fairly early prototypes at that stage that were performing kind of like Gen 3 night vision. So essentially, in a way that's pretty comparable to what we see out of pretty decent image intensifier tubes these days. What does that mean? Well, that means that we will be able to do digital night vision to a pretty good level fairly soon. Are we going to see them available to civilians quickly? That may take a little time. Okay. How long? Well, it's hard to say. So the 3 companies who were demoing some really, really impressive stuff were, oh gosh, Jay Bazano's company. One of them, the name always escapes me. I'll pull it up momentarily. A guy I know works there. He's sort of the brain behind this thing. He's a really smart guy. So another one is Psionics that has been okay, SRI International. There you go. SRI did, in terms of just pure imaging performance, was probably the most impressive one, although they're all fairly close. One was from Psionics. It's their next generation stuff. My best guess is that this is the device they developed for the IVAS program that, kind of Microsoft does the integration for that. Kind of an interesting program. And the third one was from BAE Fairchild. Fairchild is an image sensor company at some point purchased by BAE. They're doing a lot of these sort of exotic image sensors. And they had also really, really good ultra low light prototype. Of these 3, if one is going to make a commercial device with it, Psionics would be probably the most likely bet, because they already have the Aurora and other things, and this is a logical next step up. Price is going to go up. How expensive those are going to be when they make it out here is anybody's guess. They can make them less expensive than the image intensifiers. The question is whether they will. One of the big advantages of the digital night vision is that you can save an image, make a video, massage it, you retain color vision to very, very low light levels, maybe not the lowest, but very, very low light levels. Remember, image intensifier tubes are always monochromatic, right? With digital night vision, because it is digitized, you can have it spit out via Wi-Fi, Bluetooth to different projection devices, all sorts of things. The downside, of course, is that all electronics eats batteries fairly quickly. I have a suspicion that this little Photonis that I have here in terms of battery life probably has 3 to 5 times more battery life than any adequately compact digital night vision, and it's still not going to be as compact as this. So this thing I weighted is about 8.5 ounces, right? I don't remember how much the Psionics Aurora weighs, but I do know it's more than that. Honestly, one of the reasons I chose this thing is that of all of the monoculars that I found, this one has the lightest weight. If you count the weight, so I got 2 mounts for it. I got a helmet mount for this thing. This is also made by Photonis, and I got a weapon mount, which is kind of a flip to side weapon mount. So the monocular is 8.5 ounces. The mount's also 8.5 ounces. You've just added a pound to a helmet. That moves it forward, at least on my bolt head. Everything slides. Photonis packages this thing very nicely. Let me show you. It comes in this fairly nice box that I'm probably promptly going to lose. And it has a bunch of things in here, including a counterweight. So a counterweight is I actually didn't weigh the counterweight, about half a pound or so, maybe a touch more. So by the time you've added the night vision monocular and all that sort of stuff, and the mount and the counterweight, you added 1.5 to 2 pounds to the helmet. It's a lot less than you will be adding with any digital night vision. And Mr. M&B over there is saying, excellent. Psionic battery life sucks. Have to rock a USB battery pack as a counterweight if you want a decent runtime. Basically, if I were doing a digital night vision setup, let's say on a helmet, instead of a counterweight, I'd put a USB power bank there and run it off of that. But in terms of having an image and doing things with and saving it, not that you obviously can't compare, right? So the analog stuff is really real-time devices. Let's see, where was I? Yeah, Photonis. So before I got this thing, I did a bunch of research. I looked it up. Then it turns out that my buddy who's here, Brooks Precision, is a dealer for this thing. So we had a nice long conversation. I picked one up from him. If you want to get a hold of him, I am going to, before I forget, John runs kind of under the radar a little bit. So if you are interested in one of these, I made him an email under Dark Lord of Optics. Okay. Brooks Precision at darklordofoptics.com. Shoot an email and I'll make sure he gets it. To be entirely clear, I am not involved with this in any way, shape, or form, other than helping a friend. He should have a website up, I think, fairly soon. But in the meantime, just shoot an email there, and I'll forward it to him. So John is asking whether I have a PVS 14 to show size difference. I don't have a PVS 14 on me right now, but in terms of size, a PVS 14 is not too dissimilar, although it's differently configured, from this iRay micro thermal that I have. So PVS 14 is going to be close to this size, slightly different shape compared to the Photonis, and it's going to be probably about 30% heavier, maybe 40 somewhere. So the size difference is fairly significant. The Photonis is built around the 16 millimeter tube, which is one of the things that allows them to keep this thing so small. I think it runs on a single battery. John, remind me. For sure. I think it runs about 30 hours on a single AA battery on a lithium, which is not too bad. Okay. Battery counterweight actually sounds a lot better than just bare metal. Correct. So the nice thing about the counterweight, just the metal counterweight that Photonis sends, well, it doesn't cost them very much, nice of them to send it, is that it is curved, so it will sort of fit the back of the helmet pretty nicely. Most of the regular USB ones are not going to fit quite as well, but there is a strap, and I might set one up. Anyway, there's plenty of battery-powered devices that go on the helmet. We'll see. Okay. Brooks Precision, honest, I'm not really sure. I think it's 30 hours. I haven't played with it long enough at this stage to really measure, and I have not spent enough time with the built-in IR illuminator. This thing does have a built-in IR illuminator. It doesn't seem to work very far away, and I haven't spent a whole lot of time running it. So one of the things that I need to figure out is for how long the battery lasts with or without illuminator. Okay. All right. But anyhow, so if you're interested in one of these, shoot an email to Brooks Precision at darklordofoptics.com, and I'll make sure he gets it. And when he gets his website up and running, I'll add it to the description of the video. Okay. Let me remove the banner. And we'll go back discussion. Okay. So does that monocular have manual gain? It does not have manual gain. It's all automatic. And that's one of the things I was screwing around with for the last couple of days. Going out where I live, there are some very dark patches, but also occasional street lights, although not everywhere. And I have a nice big mountain and there are street lights, right? So I was trying to figure out if the auto gating, automatic gain control, is working well enough. And it is working well enough for my purposes. Okay. So okay. Can we get rough pricing? So I think there is a. I think Photonis. I think Photonis puts a restriction on the minimum advertised price and stuff like that. So if you want pricing, you may want to talk to a dealer. And I know that Photonis has changed things here and there. I probably should not talk too much. Okay. Can you talk about the details of civilian market restrictions of night vision on laser devices? So on laser devices, not too much. Some laser power is restricted. There's a variety of things in there. Not off the top of my head, I don't remember. On the night vision stuff in the US, purely night vision, I don't think there are any obvious restrictions. There are some devices that are just not available for civilians. Some of them, they say law enforcement only and stuff like that. I'm not entirely sure of where the line really is. From what I've seen, if you pay enough money, you can get your hands on most things in terms of night vision or thermal, but it's a fair amount of money. Now, there are some devices that were developed specifically for the US military, and the military puts a restriction. You can't get them, like the family weapon side stuff. You can't easily get an FWS. Although I've seen one or two in civilian hands somehow, not sure how. I thought they were restricted. All these restriction business is fairly convoluted, and I never bothered to go and really figure it out. Okay. Oh, there we go. Mr. Brooks Precision says that the map is 5250. There we go. Okay. So the farm on mine is 2200. But as I was talking earlier, farm is not everything. I'm willing to sacrifice some SNR. So the SNR on this one's about 32 dB, and the resolution, I think 68 light bears per millimeter. That's not everything. I'm looking for minimum halo, which for me is important. Most of the tubes I've seen that have very high foam also have stronger halo than this one. And I really care about out-of-band spectral response because of how I plan to use this thing. Okay. Mr. MB. Oh, nice. A built-in illuminator is a great feature to have. 31s don't have them. Most of us had IR helmet lights for and went indoors. So it's not a very bright illuminator, right? So it's for close range stuff, but when it's really, really dark, it's actually quite helpful. I tried to find an environment dark enough where I needed it, and it turned out to be not so straightforward, but I was able to test it, and it actually provides a reasonable amount of light when it's really, really pitch black, so that I can actually see something. Okay. So where was I? Okay. All right, guys. We've been at it for just under an hour, so keep the questions coming on this or anything else. So what do I plan to do with it next? So I'm going to go and play with it a little bit in the helmet, but I don't really play games where that's required. I just find it convenient. I do like to go pig hunting. So this is going to go with me next. As far as very long distance illuminators go, I don't do anything very long distance, but I have this flashlight here. This is a Streamlight Jesus, what is this thing called? Sidewinder, I think, that does have an IR illuminator as a part of it. And for the things I care about, that should be enough. It's also a regular flashlight and all that. I don't have any really long distance illuminators. The mount does have a magnet, so when the monocular is turned off, basically when it's stored up here, it's off. When I swing the mount down, automatically it comes on, which is nice and convenient. Not probably a huge deal. The next thing I'm going to spend a fair amount of time with is this guy. So that's essentially a Picatinny weapon mount. The same kind of attachment as what you use to put it on a helmet, like this. Very adjustable. You can just hide and all that sort of stuff. And where is it? Okay, and you can basically flip it to the side, kind of like a magnifier behind the red dot sight. So if you have a red dot sight or some sort of a long flexible eye relief optic that you can put far enough from you, this should work quite well. I very briefly used it behind the Vortex UH1. The Gen 2 UH1 has 2 night vision modes and seems to work quite nicely with this guy. I'm actually considering setting it up and sort of using it as my home defense gun. Use it as my home defense gun because that UH1 happens to sit on a Q's honey badger, and this has fairly short eye relief, so I kind of like the idea of using it on something without much recoil, and subsonic blackout is probably it. I had a couple of questions about this a little while back. Why don't I put this in front of an optic like you would a normal clip-on, since there is a Picatinny mount? It's not quite that simple. If you put the night vision monocular in front of the optic, then you need to make sure it is the input and output are properly lined up. It's one of the reasons why night vision clip-ons are so expensive, aside from the fact that they're designed to look very far away, is that in the eyepiece they have something called the Risley prisms. And what you use them, they're essentially what's called steering prisms. It's a set of 3 prisms. You start rotating them and it can change the angle of the beam output, right? And that way you have an optic, everything is sighted in, you put this clip-on in front of it, and you adjust the Risley prisms so that your point of aim is exactly the same as it was without the clip-on. Risley prisms are fairly large and add a good bit to the price of this thing. This thing is nice, simple, lightweight monocular, so it obviously does not have a Risley prism. But it works just fine if it is behind an optic. What does that mean to be behind an optic? If, let's say, I have a rifle scope or prismatic, let's say a prismatic. So what would I have? Oh, this has fairly long eye relief. Okay. So theoretically, you can use this night vision monocular to look through a conventional rifle scope. This is a tracked 1:8 that I like to use for hunting hogs with a thermal clip-on. So this is roughly how far from my eye. Let's see if you guys can see me a little bit better. This thing is about 4 inches, the length of a finger, right? So if I put a night vision monocular in here to see something, I basically have to be here. So my position, everything has changed. It doesn't work. If I put this thing fairly far forward so that I can line up the monocular behind it, when I remove the monocular, now I'm way too far away. Is there a day optic with magnification with which putting the night vision monocular behind it might work? Yeah, actually. You need something with very, very forgiving eye relief, and the one device I can think of is the Trigicon ACOG 3x30. It has that crazy eye relief. They constructed the field of view. Field of view is fairly narrow, but the eye relief is really, really wide. And the eye relief is sufficiently flexible, where I might actually be able to set it up sufficiently far from my eye, where it's still going to look okay, and I'll be able to flip this thing in and see well enough. I haven't tried it. I don't have a 3x30 ACOG. I'll probably need to get my hands on one and experiment. Until then, I intend to run it behind a non-magnified holographic sight that I can put far enough forward. Okay. Let's see. Played overnight airsoft games before, but only with white light. They were hilarious. Night visions are allowed, but kids can't even afford the cheap Chinese ones. Yeah. Oh, that's actually a good question. Am I correct in saying that heat can affect halo? Yes. You will have generally slightly higher halo with heat, but honestly, for the range of, for the typical temperatures that we run into in normal life, I'm pretty impressed with how well all the modern tubes that I've seen handle that. Is there a difference? Yeah. Is it huge? Not from what I've seen, but it's a good point. I live out in Mexico. It's not, this thing is black. It's not hard to put it in the sun while it's off, right? And let it warm up a little bit and then do some testing. Okay. That's interesting. The question has been gnawing at me. What is the best MRDS for passive aiming? Is there anything that comes close to the aim.22? I have heard Leopold Delta Point is better than most MRDS. Application is piggybacked over a scope. I assume by passive aiming you mean when you have a night vision monocular and you're looking through a red dot sight. There are quite a few now that have night vision setting, right? You have to be able to turn down the dot brightness very low. Aim point is very good. Like I said, I use a holographic, but obviously too large to piggyback over a regular scope. Some holosuns I've seen look to have very competent night vision modes. I don't remember if Delta Point has one. I think it does, but I don't remember for sure. They do work fairly well. That is another thing where with the Photonis, what makes a red dot sight, for example, work better or worse with a night vision device? One, the dot brightness. There has to be a night vision mode, otherwise it's just too bright. That's one. Two is there are coatings on the lenses, and they're really not designed for near infrared. They're not designed for the typical spectral range where most night vision devices work. That is actually one of the reasons I went with the Photonis, because it has this broader spectral range and it sees just fine in a regular visible range. So that difference should be nullified with the Photonis. But if you've spent the 5-something grand on something like this, it may be easier to just get the aim point. So. Interesting. Just curious when you're stargazing in your temperatures in New Mexico. So one of the nice things about New Mexico is that it's really cools down at night. So when I'm stargazing, temperature is really not an issue. Yeah. Fireprix trying to look through another tube, but the knot sucks. I'd probably want an RMR similar style, assuming a monocular. Use your other eye and look through the sight. Yeah, it's a fair point. I look at this as quick aiming, so it hasn't really given me too much trouble. It may be easier with some of the smaller bodied sights. Yes, under night vision, the main issue to me is light transmission. Cheaper red dots and noticeably darker dual tubes help tremendously. Yes, cheaper red dots are not designed for near-infrared transmission, but also most image intensifier tubes are not designed to look in the visible range, right? Something that Photonis' 4G specifically tried to address. There's a point, though, that I feel like I'm approaching, including shooting that out. Yeah, that's a fair point. Okay. Hop on YouTube has done a lot of vids on passive shooting. He seems to prefer an EO tag, but not sure which model. So I haven't tried with an EO tag. Like I said, I tried it with the Vortex UH1, and it seems to work quite well. It is possible that just having a larger window, even though it's a tubeless sight, helps. It's something I'll need to experiment a little bit with. Okay. All right, let's see. What did I not cover about the Photonis specifically, or night vision in general, that you guys want to know? And if okay, do you use a scope mount of different height when using night vision through scopes? So this is mostly AR applications, so the height is about right, but also the Picatinny mount you can get from Photonis has height adjustment, so I can adjust where the night vision monocular sits. I don't have to do anything different with the scope. I can basically do the adjustment on the side of the monocular. EOTech on the riser is the way, but I'm not quite willing to piggyback an EOTech. Yeah, I don't blame you. If you do manage to piggyback an EOTech, please send me a picture. I want to see that. All right, so that would be cool. What I really want to see a picture, I want a picture of some sort of a really compact prismatic and an EOTech piggybacked on top of that. That would be cool. I want to talk about mounting solution that goes a huge way in improving usability and comfort. Honestly, mounting solutions that I got from Photonis, I'm really impressed with. The helmet mount locks up tight, has lots of adjustment to it, comes on and off easily. Can swing this way, that way. Everything is solid. I've been playing with it for a couple of days. I only got the Photonis recently, and now you can where's it thing? Move it in and out and all sort of stuff. Very adjustable once adjusted. Seems to stay solid and not too heavy. Like I said, the mount, despite all the adjustments, is about 8.5 ounces. So that's pretty good. The Picatinny mount that flips to the side is slightly more questionable. There are some ARs where it may not work well. So what they did, I don't know if you guys can see here. Where's my light? Well enough. So there are two screws here. Let's see if I can have a different light here. Oh, there we go. There we go. Yep. There are two screws here, and this thing slides up and down. So it is quite nicely adjustable. It adjusts the height. And also, if you end up with this a little bit higher up, when you flip the mount down, this thing is not going to bump the receiver. I'm a little bit concerned with some guns. It's going to be like this. But I think I'll need to adjust it up a little bit. And that concern goes away. Once you slide the monocular on here, there is a locking pin that's released by this little lever on the bottom that holds it in place. I think Photonis claims that this can survive the recoil of a 308. You know, it's a pretty small pin. I don't know if I'd... And the recoil would go right against it. I'm not convinced. I want to experiment with that, but something low recoil, I don't see a problem. On top of it, I mean, this is kind of the eye relief for this thing. So I don't want to put this on anything with recoil. I'll be honest with you. Okay. So let's see. Thoughts on 8.21 writing on top of Forex ACOG? I believe the mount is in the works. I'm a little surprised the mount doesn't already exist. Interesting. That should work. Do you have a pitch and yaw adjustment? I do not see any obvious pitch and yaw adjustment. It's either locked like this or flipped to the side like this. I don't see anything else. I don't see anything else here. Okay. But for me, it lines it up very, very nicely because, the same company makes the monocular. And this thing, it lines it very nicely, lined up to the center of the Picatinny rail. And since there is no radical here, anything like that, as long as it's lined up to the center of the Picatinny rail and I can move up and down, that's probably sufficient for my purposes. Is it going to be high enough in this position for a piggybacked red dot side? I don't know. I'll try. So I've got. I need to get my. I'll ping a Trigicon. I'll see if I can get my hands on a 3x30 Trigicon, piggyback a red dot sight on it and play. Okay. So it's an interesting question. Which is more durable in terms of rough conditions, maybe combat situations, digital or analog? It depends on whether it's built for combat conditions, right? Most commercial somewhat affordable night vision devices are built with plastic housings and all that. They have some issue with thermal expansion, although they are generally fairly durable. This thing is all metal. Photonis builds military grade stuff generally. So most development of analog night vision has been driven by military needs. So I would suspect most of them are built a little bit tougher. That having been said, commercial digital night vision was not designed for military needs. I don't know if it's as durable, but there's plenty of digital night vision type devices and thermals and stuff like that built for the military that are very robust. So if you spend the same amount of money, I doubt there'll be much durability difference. On balance, I'd say military grade night vision is probably a little bit more robust just because they're built to a higher standard. Okay. Oh, that's interesting. So Arisaka Defense teased an ACOG mount for T1 footprint. I'll need to look into that. That could be very interesting. Arisaka Defense makes exceedingly nice stuff. Any experience with Cry Precision Nightcap? Why is it so familiar? Hold on. Not a lot of experience, definitely. Is this what I'm thinking of? Ah, this thing. Yeah, I've seen it. I haven't used it. Huh, interesting. Interesting idea. No. Never used it. Where have I seen it? Must have been SHOT Show or something like that. Okay. Aha. Mr. MNB says, yes, they are fantastic compared to Skull Crusher. Okay, I'll take your word for it. Maybe I need to pick one up. They don't look to be particularly expensive. Interesting. Oh, how cool. So a nightcap is, I'm going to share my screen for those who don't know. And it looks like it's something I need to pay a little bit more attention to. It's this thing. Okay. Solving the problem of wearing night vision goggles when you don't need the helmet. Okay. Compatible with all current 3-hole and 4-hole NVG mounts, yada, yada, yada. No helmet needed to use night vision goggles. Very interesting. I don't know. I'll take your guys' word for it. We'll make it on my list when I get to it. We'll see. Okay. All right. Where were we? That's that. I don't think I have a ton more else to say about the Photonis at this stage in the game. And I'll plan to continue messing with it, and we'll see how it goes. I'll be busy for the next couple of weeks. I'm moving this weekend. But once that's behind me, I'm going to get back on this whole night vision thermal exercise, and we'll see how it goes. If you guys don't have any more questions, I will start wrapping this up. I don't have anything else really pre-prepared. I just wanted to kind of give you an overview of night vision and talk about what Photonis means by 4G. And once I've exhausted this topic, I am perfectly comfortable turning in for the night. All right. I will have a drink of water, give you guys another moment, and if no more questions come up, I will bid you adieu. That's funny. Would you rather fight one horse-sized duck or 100 duck-sized horses? It really depends on whether I'm doing this barehanded or not. Generally, one horse-sized duck, probably. If I have any sort of a weapon on me, I'll take one large thing over 100 small ones any day. All right, Mr. Chen agrees with me. One duck for me. I will say this, ducks are mean. So that's not an easy choice. I've seen pissed off ducks chase away all sorts of larger animals. Horse-sized duck might eat me. Terrifying. I don't know. Yeah. I think Mr. MB is just trying to give me nightmares about horse-sized ducks. Geese are sphincters, yes, very much so. Generally, birds are mean, right? Thanks to Disney and stuff, all those swans, geese, ducks, etc. generally get pretty good rep. They're mean, exceptionally so. I don't know how this bird conversation started. I'm not a bird person. My interest in birds is generally purely culinary, right? So I divide most birds into three types: useful, meaning edible; semi-useful, meaning nice to look at, not necessarily edible; and completely useless, the rest of them. So, have you seen Howard the Duck? No, thank you. No, I have not seen Howard the Duck. I'll pass. Let's see. Okay. Oh, you know what? I'm going to switch gears a little bit before we wrap up. Swamp Fox released this large prismatic called Saber, which is a 5x36. I talked a little bit about it after SHOT Show, so I got my hands on one. Then I've been messing with it for a little while. It's kind of an interesting device. It's big. It's about 25 ounces. It's heavy. It has mounts for red dot sights for like an RMS footprint. So I'm gonna set one up. It's a really interesting thing. It's very interesting to see how much of a resurgence these prismatics have been making. I've been making for a little while now an argument that compact 3/4 power prismatics are the ticket, and I sort of still stick with that to a good degree. But I have two 5-power prismatics here I've been spending some time with, and when coupled with red dot sights with a piggybacked offset, it's nice to have a little more magnification. I have to admit, I may be changing my mind. Although I still probably, on balance, slightly prefer the small prism models like this Vortex Gen 2 Spitfire. But it's pretty interesting. So you'll see a lot more from me again on prismatics. There'll be another rash of reviews. I'm wrapping up with a bunch of them, and I am taking up to about 5 power, and I have a 7 power prismatic here, which is very, very different. That's still a prototype. But the amount of development I'm seeing with prismatics is kind of like what I saw with low power variables 3-4 years ago. They're going through this really interesting renaissance. Okay. All right. The comments are occupied with commentary on. Oh, there we go. Now we're talking about prisms. There we go. So I still have a little time left. So let's talk about prisms a little bit. Mr. MB, honestly, prism plus MRDS for me kicks in LPVOs, low power variable optic. But yes and no. Not all of them. And depends on what you want to do. But I've been using a lot of low power variables outside of hunting, been in fairly restricted ranges. With low power variables, I really like the front focal plane ones, right? There are a few second focal plane ones I enjoy, it's like this tract and all that, but I like to push the distance and everything, and it's not ideal. So for me, it is sort of an interesting thing in that if I'm on a budget, I'd probably pick up a modern, good quality prismatic over a more second focal plane low power variables. I can deal with the restricted, single magnification range, set up an offset red dot sight, something like that, and be off to the races. Once I'm willing to spend a bit more money, there are some modern low power variables that are just exceptional. Once you get closer to $1,500 or thereabouts, there's this primary arms PLX C128 that just kicks ass. And there's a little bit of a weight penalty and size penalty, but it's really not that much. Then going up in price, there's Vortex 1 to 10. In the $1,200 range, there's Psi 1 to 6. Between these three in different price ranges, they give me a lot of capability. But if I'm not spending quite that much money, I don't know, all these new prisms from Primary Arms and others are really, really appealing. And the more I use them, the more I think I take them overall over second focal plane low power variables. Some exceptions, right? So if you're going to be hunting with a thermal clip-on, many clip-ons need an objective to clamp on, and then you should be using something like this. There are two second focal plane low power variables that I have, and it's this tract 1 to 8 and a Steiner P4XI 1 to 4. And I like them both, but my primary application for them is a little bit different. They work with a variety of different clip-ons, and their changing magnification really helps for me. And being able to go on 1 power is generally helpful for me, but I don't use them beyond essentially maximum point blank range of the gun. The moment I want to expand my performance criteria, I don't want the second focal plane scope because I use the reticle for holes and I get screwed up all the time. So, okay. How's the micro prism PA3X testing going? I decided to spend the money on the 4X. Yeah, I'm done testing it. I just need to release the video. I love it. It kicks ass. For the money, it's awesome, basically. With the ACOG, I like some of the ACOGs. So I'm getting older. The fact that ACOGs don't have adjustable eyepieces gives me a little bit of trouble. Not too bad, but it does give me a little bit of trouble. So modern low power, modern prismatics that have adjustable eyepieces, like this guy. This is a Vortex Spitfire Gen 2, which is quite nice, and a few others. They cost less, optical performance is not as good, almost as good, and they work well. Specifically with the 4X ACOG, that's actually the one I like the least. I have the Israeli copy of it, the Meprolite X4, which is actually the same thing. I'm having a very hard time with a very short eye relief of this thing. I like the other ACOGs. The 4-power ACOG is not for me. I've tested it in the past, spent a lot of time with it. For me, the eye relief is just too restrictive on that thing. How's the low light performance with those higher end LPVOs? That was my biggest complaint overseas. I liked prisms for the FOV and situational awareness that they gave me. LPVOs never had enough mag. Interesting complaint. Yeah. I don't know what LPVOs you used. So with the modern high quality ones, the low light performance is actually quite good. Now, if you have, let's say, a 1:10 Razor Gen 3, that's what sits on one of my primary AR. On 10 power, low light performance is not great. Exit pupil is small. So in low power, I dial down to about 5 or 6, right? When I have good light and I have distance, I can dial it up. If I need to go fast, it's really bright dot and I dial it down. I still have auxiliary sights just because I'm paranoid. But overall low light performance, if you keep magnification a reasonable range, is very good. On balance, the low light performance of prismatics like the ACOG on the same magnification is going to be a little bit better. It's a larger objective, right? It's a 4x32 objective. But you give up some flexibility, right? Optically, modern LPVOs are good enough where I'm okay with a compromise. Okay. Could you make the argument that SFP is preferable over, excuse me, my contact lenses is doing something weird. Could you make the argument that SFP is preferable over FFP in a shit hit the fan scenario where durable and quick reaction is needed? No, I can't. Quite the opposite. The more stressed out I am, the less I want to worry about the reticles, subtensions, and all that sort of shit. If you're shooting up close and personal, you just need the bright aiming point. It's one of the reasons why all the front focal plane LPVOs I'm talking about are comparatively expensive, because pulling off good illumination or good reticle features for nice visibility and all magnifications is somewhat tricky. So no, I think that's quite the opposite. That was when 1:6 was the biggest you could get, though. Next trip, I took a lower powered rifle scope and piggybacked MRDS, much better but heavy. Yeah, if you're looking for low light performance, ultimately you're looking for objective diameter, right? There's no replacement for cubic inches, right? This is a 32 millimeter. So just to show you the difference, most modern LPVOs 24 millimeter objective, ACOG is similar 32 millimeter, right? And the difference is significant. So. Since I've been made aware of the marriage between ACOG and aimpoint, favorite ACOG reticle. I kind of hate BDC. I know I'm weird, but I'd rather just have the basic mill tree. I don't like any ACOG reticles. On balance, I think I slightly prefer the chevron ones. I don't like BDCs very much either. And in the modern world, there's really no excuse for not adding a few wind holes even to a BDC reticle. I think there are some prismatics coming out that will fix that, not ACOGs. As is, one of the reasons I like the primary honest micro 3X so much is that the reticle has wind holes. It makes all the difference in the world. On a man-sized target, 18-inch plate, something like that, you really don't need that much magnification to shoot fairly far out. But if you don't have wind holes, you're just guessing, really. The reticle has to accommodate some holding for wind, really. Have you tried the mount solutions like KRM spacers where it pushes the ACOG back? Yeah, I mean, my problem is not that I have to where the scope is positioned. I've tried a couple of risers that also push it back. It's just that the eye has to be really in a very particular spot, and I have a big Jewish nose, so occasionally also get hit by this thing if there is recoil. And it's just the eye box is not quite forgiving enough. It's optically, it's a very nice scope. It's nice, it's compact, and it's a nice field of view, good image quality. The reticle is lacking, and it's comparatively hard to get behind. When there wasn't a ton of competition, great. But when before this modern rise of all these Chinese-made but good quality prismatics, I did several comparisons on my legacy website, opticsthoughts.com, of different 4x prismatics, right? A hammer, ACOG, Alcan, Hansol, etc. And in the end, of all of those, I like the ACOG the least. Although I like the 3 power and the 3.5, I just don't like the 4 because of the eye relief issues. I picked the Alcan. I still have that Alcan and XS. When I can't use it anymore because my eyes don't focus, I'll give it to my son. So check out the Aurora reticle. Yeah, you can't really get those anymore. I don't think Trigicon and primary arms are working together anymore. Aurora was a PA's reticle in the 4-power ACOG, which solved one of my issues with it, but it's not really easily available anymore. If Razor 1 to 10 and PM2 short.DLCC is the same price, would you still pick the Razor 1 to 10? No, I would pick the Schmidt. I had them side by side. The Razor is the better scope for the money. If I had unlimited funds, Schmidt's amazing. I really liked it. So, yeah, there you go. The ACSS reticle in the ACOG was the Aurora. My favorite ACOG reticle is the amber triangle. That works fine too. I like the stuff with the with the chevron or triangle. A lot of it is what you get used to. Okay. Reticles are very much use dependent. For combat type shooting, BDC is king. For target competition type shooting, millimeter is better. Same with magnification versus field of view. I had this argument already online on Matt's Everyday Marksman's live stream once. So you're both right and wrong. You're right in that BDC is fast. You're wrong in that millimeter is better, is only for target. Well, it's not what you said, but with the right sight-in, it's very easy to set up a milliradian reticle to use as a BDC. There's nothing to it. I've even done hybrid BDC mill reticles. And you don't even need much. If you look at the typical trajectories of standard 5 to 6, stuff like that, with slightly more careful sight-in, you can have your milliradian reticle, and the first couple of hashes very nicely correlate to nice round numbers in terms of distances, and beyond that you have the normal milliradian stuff. Because if you're shooting fairly far away, you probably have time to think about it a little bit more. It is a matter of sighting it in and setting it up the right way and paying attention to trajectories. It's actually a good point. I need to work out those tables and do a video on that. So 3x ACOG is the best ACOG. I hated the TA31 with a fiery passion of 1,000 burning suns. I'd rather have a M68 CCO and flip to side magnifier. I actually like the flip to side magnifiers with modern red dot sights where the battery essentially lasts forever for all practical purposes. There's a lot to be said about magnifiers, and actually use them quite a bit. Happen to really like, so PA has a new one. I really like the 4x Sig Juliet for some reason. It's really nice. Magnifier and a few others. The 3x ACOG has a lot to recommend itself. It's really good for shooting and going fairly quickly with magnification. It's really not ideal if you are going to have any sort of prolonged observation because they really restricted the field of view. Eye fatigue is going to be higher, stuff like that. So saying that the 3x ACOG is unquestionably the best one is sort of open to interpretation to some degree. But if I were buying an ACOG in the modern market, the only one that has any appeal to me is a 3-power, and I wish it had a better reticle. Have I tried the mini ACOGs or the ones with a donut of death? Yes. Donut of death works okay, but for me it's not ideal. But it works fine. I actually own a compact ACOG. I own the 1.5 to 16. I set it up on my wife's rifle, fiber illuminated, no batteries, very forgiving eye relief, and just a little bit of magnification. I really like optics with just a little bit of magnification. There is this argument how just a little bit of magnification slows you down and all that, and it comes from gun games, and it's absolutely accurate. But and Lord knows I'm not exactly a soldier. But from everything I've run into where you have to think and shoot, not just shoot, just a little bit of magnification for better target identification, better understanding of whether you need to be shooting is really, really important. And very low magnification devices, like I really like 1.5 power compact ACOG. I like the 2-power GLX prismatic from Primary Arms. I like this because they're still fast enough. I can go faster with the holographic, right, if I'm just blasting things. But if I need to see what I'm doing, just a little bit of magnification goes a long way, right? The nice thing about the compact ACOG with a very low power is that it's very, very forgiving, and I don't think there I miss the adjustable eyepiece quite as much. But once again, if I were spending my own money, would I buy the 1.5 power compact ACOG or the 2-power GLX from Primary Arms for half the price? I'd probably go with the GLX, right? So just something to keep in mind. Okay. Interesting. Something I'm missing. Small correction, but ACS and Aurora were different offerings. I thought Aurora was one of the ACSS family reticles that Primary Arms did in partnership with Trijicon. That wasn't a 4-power ACOG. Yeah, maybe I'm wrong. So, do you have any experience with the Leica Amplus scopes? The price range is dropping to $1,000 to $1,500 range for Leica scopes, and I wondered if they're good. For that money, they're actually quite good. The best one on balance, if I was looking at one, would probably be the 3 to 18 by 44. It is done in the same way as the PRS. They're getting subsystems from Light Optics Works in Japan, and then they are adding a few things and stuff like that. They're adding a few things and stuff like that in Germany, doing their own optimization. I think the eyepiece is modified and a couple other things. So it's kind of like a mix of Japanese and German. That's why they can get the lower prices. These are nice hunting scopes. They're all second focal plane, right? So, but for hunting use, I think they're really competitive with a lot of stuff out there. I am planning to do a big hunting scope comparison, probably in the spring, and Amplus is going to be one of those. I'd buy the GLX as well over the 1.5x ACOG. The cost to quality ratio is impressive on the PA. That is very, very true. PA, it's not just PA, right? So PA uses OEMs. They use them well. They QC everything. But Primary Arms, Burris, Vortex, Swamp Fox. There are several factories now in China that are all of a sudden making really high quality for the money prismatics. Now, if you look at, I have a 4x Alcan, it's optically still better than any of this, Chinese prismatics, right? But it's mine is now discontinued. That's just a straight full power. But it was a lot more expensive. And if I'm spending that much money, I'd not be drawn to either low power variable or switch power Alcan or something like that. To me, right now, this new crop of fairly compact prismatics that are marketing by Primary Arms and others. Primary Arms does reticles for them quite well. Now, all of these fairly moderately priced prismatics, to me, are more or less your best bang for the buck under about $1,000. So a couple exceptions, but that's it. Makes a big difference. Okay. So, All right, let's see. Does the M plus 1 to 6 have power light illumination? Same price as Gen 2 1 to 6, and I heard it's daylight bright. I actually don't know whether it has the fiber or not. It looked like a fiber looking dot, but I have not spent a ton of time looking at it. Actually, you know what? I can probably tell you right now. Let me look at something. My best guess that it does indeed have the power light. Let's see. Where was I? Yeah, I think it's fiber optic illuminator. But anyhow, so when I saw it, it was absolutely day bright. So it's probably power light. Alrighty. Okay. We've been at it by about an hour and a half, which is ballpark the time that I originally allotted to this. So I'm going to give it 5 more minutes. If there are any remaining questions on night vision or day scopes or anything that comes to mind, and then I am going to wrap this up. That's below the belt. Considering an LHT 4.5 to 22, but really wish that its reticle wasn't a 3 to 15. Yeah, I really wish that Vortex, in addition to the 4.5 to 22, because I really like that one, made a lower power model, 3 to 15, or 2 to 10, or 2.5 to 12.5, something like that. I really like to have some 2 to 3 power on the low end to use with clip-ons, and if they made it to the slightly smaller objective, so it could be a little shorter, it would make for a very nice addition to that product line. But I don't make Vortex's product decision. I am happy they got the 4.5 to 22 out, and you had 21 ounces. That thing is amazing, I gotta say. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I think I am going to call it a night. Thank you all for joining in, and I do appreciate the good questions. And let's see. So next week, I may or may not do one next week. Like I said, I'm moving this weekend. It's going to take me a few days to settle down and stuff. So I may not be able to do one next week. I am hoping to not travel for the next month or so. So either next week or 2 weeks from now, I'm going to do one more. I'm probably going to go back and talk about thermals again. I want to continue this exploration of electro-optics and talk about a few specific models. If there is anything from this live stream that you'd like me to cover in more detail, please put that in the comments. I do appreciate it. Thank you all for sticking with me for this hour and a half. And as always, if you have any questions, you know where to find me, darklordofoptics.com. Thank you and good night.